Hello, and welcome to Scaffold to Success. Today, we're going to be exploring scaffolding instruction for English language learners. My name is Kristen Adams, and I'm a staff development facilitator at the Carbon-Lehigh Intermediate Unit. If you'd like to join us on any of the links in this presentation, please go to bit.ly/scaffolding ELs, and you will have the entire deck available to you with all of the resources that I'm going to share with you today. To get started, let's take a look at how we would define scaffolding instruction for our English language learners.
It is difficult for teachers to have a newcomer come into their classrooms. I'm thinking particularly about elementary, but also secondary. There's a huge gap in the language of the child and the language of the teacher. How do you bridge that gap? There are many ways to present content concepts regardless of the proficiency of the child, and that is usually called scaffolding, that you're creating a structure that allows the child to move from where they are to where you want them to be, even though they may not have all the language. We do this by bringing in real life experiences or concrete items, pictures. We're doing the science experiment first. We're taking the field trip first. We're manipulating objects first, so that we have built a background from which to add language. So if we bring in enough concrete visuals or manipulatives for students, we can present difficult concepts without the language or with limited language. Now, of course, eventually we want to plug in those key terms so that kids are able to interact with academic concepts. So we do want to teach the vocabulary, but it doesn't have to happen before. It can happen first, the experience, the concrete first, then you build up with that scaffolding later on.
And ultimately, what we want to look at is not only defining what scaffolding is, but looking at our English language learners and seeing where they are and getting them to that next level. So when we talk about scaffolding, I know that we just learned a little bit about how we can scaffold our English language learners by giving them experiences, but we could also provide those temporary supports. That's what scaffolding is. It's a systematic, planned way to help connect the new things that they're learning to things that they already know, the known. It moves our English language learners towards stronger understanding and greater independence. One of the ways that you can also look at it is through the I do, we do, you do framework. And remember, when we're talking about scaffolding, we're not only talking about scaffolding your specific content, but we're also talking about scaffolding their language domains. So when we talk about scaffolding, this is a video that's going to show us how we can scaffold using the I do, we do, you do framework for our English language learners.
Now we're going to get to the project where you are going to have to create a portrait.
One of my strategies is the I do, we do, you do. Every time I introduce a new concept, I'm going to do that. There might be a student that doesn't need modeling, but there's always a student that does. So why wouldn't I provide that scaffold for them? So every time I ask them to do something, I model it first. My students are not only in mild to moderate special education, but they're also long-term English language learners.
You're each going to get a portrait scenario, okay? You're going to have to create a portrait. I'll show you, here's the sample photo. I don't know if you recognize Miss Talbot, and that's me, and this is our example portrait. But
it's important to show students how we think. So when I introduced the final project, I had an example of what I wanted the finished project to be, and I had a graphic organizer up that was blank, which looked identical to theirs, and I had the synopsis.
This is the sample. Look up here and follow along. This is a portrait of two sisters who are very good girls.
The I do part is just me modeling how I'm thinking about the picture. I'm just thinking aloud.
So I need to think, how can I portray this? So I'm gonna start and I'm gonna say, okay, sisters who are very good girls.
The whole thing is a gradual release of responsibility from teacher to student.
What kind of clothing would I wear if I were a good girl? Ooh.
At this point, I'm not asking for student participation, but they might jump in and say something, and that's fine. But I can't at that point then say, oh, they all get it, and just skip to the you do, because 2 people chimed in, but I had 12 students there today, so I have to assume that maybe 10 were still listening or kind of not there yet. But when I first started teaching, I would have said, great, they got it. Okay, let's move on. You guys do. So then I moved on and I did the we do. So the we do portion of the lesson is really you're still providing prompting. And that's really what we do means, is that I'm not leaving him hanging.
They study all the time. I think I can show that by props. What would I be holding if I studied all the time? Books.
The you do was the actual project. So then I said, okay, now you're ready to do it. And I gave each group their synopsis and their graphic organizer.
And then, okay, the grandparents are gonna be, you're gonna be the grandfather, you're gonna be the grandmother. He has to wear like a beard.
I found that the clearer I am, the better quality work I see from the students. And because the students know what they're doing, they feel safe learning new things.
What a great example of the I do, we do, you do framework, and providing that scaffold for our students, taking the things that are new information, building upon that, and taking them to the information they already have success with. So things you should consider when you're scaffolding any student. What can your student already do on their own? And then what are the next steps a student must learn with guidance? That's what we would consider scaffolding for any student. Let's take a look specifically at scaffolding our English language learners. Our ELS language proficiency levels must be considered, the we to can do descriptors, and our ESL academic background. What has their schooling been like thus far? Are there any gaps? Are there any pieces of information that will help us understand the entire student and plan for the scaffolds that they might need in the future? So when planning instruction for ELs, when we're looking at scaffolds, you want to start with these questions. What can my ELs do? What might be challenging? What supports will give ELs access to this content? And our job is really to make sure that the content that we're teaching is comprehensible for them. They're able to understand it. And that's why providing scaffold for our ELs is so critical. So how can we do this? Let's go through some of the ways that you can support your ELs in the classroom. The first one is by providing clarity. Here's a few ideas to help you provide clarity to your ELs. Speak slowly and clearly. Minimize or explain idioms. And print. Don't use script when at all possible, so that the information that you're portraying to them is in a clear, comprehensible manner. We want to minimize our visual clutter. Take a look at the graphic organizer on the left. Now take a look at the one on the right. As you can see, there's many boxes, there's many pieces of information. If they're trying to learn language and content, we want to make sure that when we're providing visuals for them, it's easy to understand. We're not telling you to dumb down the curriculum, but to make it in a fashion that they're able to take what's most important and to connect that information. We're providing that scaffold. The same thing, it could be true on these two. As you can see, we have a bunch of information about adding integers. When we go to the right-hand side, we've now broken it down in a much more simplistic fashion using something like the Freyer model. Let's dive into a unit. Let's say we're going to be talking about baseball. So one of the things you can do is provide those experiences like we heard in the opening video through Realia or objects that we're going to talk about. You can allow for those real life situations. So if we were going to be starting a unit on baseball, you could bring in a baseball bat, a glove. All those things are examples of Realia. Realia is giving them real life objects and giving them experiences with those objects. You could incorporate videos. This video is a short clip walking them through all the different parts of the vocabulary and information they are going to need in order to understand the unit on baseball. So make sure that you take advantage of ways to incorporate videos. You can use images as well. If you see at jiffy.com, you could scan this QR code, but you could pretty much type in any image that you want to do or a GIF. And you, for example, if you type in baseball, you'll see all these different baseball images that you can incorporate into your information that you're teaching your students that day. So take advantage of all those images that are out there. Another scaffold we can provide is adding sentence stems. So we can get them started about what we're going to talk about. This reminds me of, it looks like, I know that, I think that. Allowing open-ended sentence stems allows for students to have success when answering questions. Another way is by providing different sentence stems, offering a question like this: do you agree or disagree? This is a scaffold, but not the question itself. The scaffold part is that sentence frame. Yes, I agree. No, I do not. And as they start to build and start to increase their knowledge, yes, I agree that baseball is America's pastime because, and they can reference things that they have read or learned or experienced through your lesson. You could also use a closed sentence frame. So for example, you could leave blanks in a sentence and scaffold them by having them use the information they just learned and or assess the information that you've just presented. Blank and blank are two baseball positions. So are they able to name those baseball positions? Do they have to go back and take a look at the images to get to that conclusion? What do they need? What type of scaffolds will help them be successful? Is it the images? Is it the sentence stems? There are so many different things that are provided to our English language learners that can be provided. Here's another example of a close. Players sit in blank when waiting to bat. And here's our last sentence close that you could create for your English language learners. Although baseball is considered America's pastime, blank rely on baseball for economic reasons. So maybe you did a unit on different countries that also benefit from the success of baseball. You could add a word bank when teaching the unit. So if you have all these images and you want to create, as you can see, we don't want to overwhelm them by adding too many words. So if you have a low language level learner in your classroom, you could take out the information. So maybe you only have the pitcher, the batter, and the dugout. You're not adding extra words. We don't want to do that to confuse them, but maybe you have some students that are able to reason and think through a bunch of different words. You can add to the word bank. What we want to make sure is that when we're teaching, we do teach explicitly. If you start with the experience first, that is fine. Or you could start by teaching the vocabulary explicitly, or this is an activity called teach, heard of, or I'm clueless. And you could have the student sort the words in one of the three columns. Let's say they know what a dugout is. They played baseball. They could put that under the T column. I can teach the word dugout to appear. Maybe when they get to the word, the picture, they're like, oh, I've heard of that. I'm not exactly sure what baseball that is. Or maybe they get to the word inning. I'm not exactly sure. I'm clueless with that word. Then you could take your students and match them up accordingly. Those that can teach specific words could help students that do not know how to interpret that word or understand the meaning of them. You could use a combination of all these different scaffolds to help support our students and to provide them that success, going from the things that are unknown and connecting them to the things that they already know. There's a whole host of resources out here. This one is from Common Lit. And this is a great way, as you can see, if you use this resource, you can take an article you're going to be using with your classroom. So let's say we were looking at this, baseball is a field of dreams. On the right-hand side, we can see it's in English. When you click on the little globe, you can see it translates it into Spanish. It translates it into a lot of different languages as well. I will show you right now. If you click on the little globe, you can see all the different languages that are available for you on Common Lit that you can translate into for those students. They will go over to the article and then click on the globe and it will translate paragraph by paragraph. There's also a way for it to read. The read aloud is only in English, but if you want them to hear what it sounds like in English, that's another great tool that you could use through Common Lit. What we really want to do is to reduce the linguistic load. So here are a few ways that you can do that. You could provide translation resources. Talking Points and Google Translate are two excellent resources. You could modify and level the text. Newsella and ReadWorks are both free sites that you can use that allow you to not only look at documents, but to level them in a way that makes the curriculum comprehensible for them. There's also features in Newsella that allows you to look for ELL text sets as well. For ReadWorks, it's the same type of thing. You could take a text, so here is the baseball bat sweet spot. You can look for the grade level or the lexile. You can then allow the students to listen to it, or you could assign it for them. So that's another great way to assign it into your Google Classroom. We also want to build the background. So part of reducing the load that the students have to carry with learning content and language is by pre-teaching vocabulary, showing videos, or going on a virtual field trip. So if we were continuing our unit on baseball, we could go on a virtual baseball stadium tour using Google Earth. Another way that we could provide a scaffold is through simplifying directions. So as you can see, here is our directions. Let's say this was on the paper for your students to do. Carefully read each sentence below and determine its noun and verb. Then underline the noun once and the verb twice. You could take that direction for your L's and simplify it. Read each sentence. Put one line under the noun, put 2 lines under the verb. As you can see, you took those sentences, you made them smaller and simplified the way that you explained it, which would make it clearer and more comprehensible for your L's. Another idea is to modify some of your directions right on the fly. As you can see, I took an example. Let's say you wanted them. In this lesson, you will read and discuss The Monkey's Paw by W.W. Jacobs and explore the use of predicting and foreshadowing throughout the story. Well, that's a lot of language for them. What you could do instead is cross out words that are unnecessary. As you can see, you can find instead of you can access. And then the short story, The Monkey's Paw, and audio version, you could just say, listen to the story. It's in your Google Classroom. So think about words that we use, our incidental language, and all of those expressions that we add to our teaching. We want to eliminate them. We want to make it clear. We want to have clarity in what we're saying. And that is a huge way to scaffold for our English language learners. We could also modify assessments and assignments. So here are some ideas. Use multiple choice, but get rid of the confusing choices. Do not allow for our L's to be tricked up by the sheer nature of the question. Eliminate the things that they don't need to know. So maybe you have a way to get rid of one answer so that they can zero in on what's most important. That's one way of modifying. Use those sentence frames and sentence stems. Include a word bank. Don't add extra words. If you have students that are higher level and you want to start to put those in for them, that is fine. But if you're talking about a student that has a lower English proficiency level, we don't want to add extra words. Shorten the test length. Read questions aloud when possible. Reduce our academic vocabulary and simplify the questions like I showed you in our examples. We want to reduce visual clutter. Those are some ways that you can modify assignments and assessments to provide scaffolds for our L's. So there are also practices that help with scaffold instruction. Allow students opportunities to think, pair, share. The thinking and processing time is a crucial part of allowing our students to think through not only the content, but the language they now need to use. Provide those think alouds. So when we use the I do, we do, you do model, you're starting with you modeling and thinking aloud the information that's most important for your L. Extend wait time. Don't be afraid if it's silent. Give them that opportunity for that waiting and processing time. Allow for students to collaborate. As you can see, when they were doing the we do, they were in collaborative groups. They were talking to each other. The teacher was modeling for them and walking around and helping with that collaboration. Take a look at the speech that you're using. Are you adding a lot of extra incidental language, idioms, and things that could be confusing? Is your body language help supporting what you want your students to learn? Use hand motions and gestures. Give them symbols and things that they can connect. Write down things that you are giving orally so that English language learners can reference them at a later time. Take time to check for understanding often and use that to drive your instructional decisions. And as with any student, make sure that you're giving them time for brain breaks, especially if they're at an extended time in your classroom. So in conclusion, here are some things I want you to think about in terms of your delivery when you're talking about your English language learners. I'm going to read some of these questions and I'm going to ask you to pause and to think through some of these questions. And I want you to identify one thing that you want to work on when working with your L's. Here's our first one. Do I speak clearly at an appropriate pace and with eye contact? Do I minimize the use of idioms? Do I repeat key points? Do I provide modeling and/or multiple examples? Do I use non-linguistic clues? Do I provide both visual and written directions? Do I regularly check for understanding? I'm going to give you a minute to think through some of those questions, and I want you to identify an area that you would like to have as your goal for working with English language learners. Which one of these do you feel like you need to work on in the next couple months? Now that you have identified that, I want you to make that a goal for when you're teaching our English language learners and providing those opportunities for them to be successful. In order to do that, We not only need to remember to get to know our English language learners, because it's ultimately all about relationships that we build with our students, but we need to understand their proficiency levels. You need to take a look at their WIDA access scores if you haven't already done that, and take a closer look at their reading, writing, listening, and speaking scores, and make a plan to make sure that your content is accessible for all your students. In conclusion, we're going to hear from our principal talk about the gifts that ELs bring to any classroom and to any school.
We see our students as having gifts. It's not a detriment to speak another language. It's a gift. Some of these babies are traveling to different countries, having to assimilate in different communities with different family members, with different friends in classrooms. That takes a high level of emotional intelligence, which to me is a gift to be able to do successfully. And I don't think we give our second language learners and our immigrant students enough credit for what they have to do as children. Lord knows I couldn't do it as an adult. So our staff sees these gifts in our students, not just the academic gifts, but the emotional talents. And we try to really reach out and find those gifts and talents. And I'm very proud. One of the things that we do at Miniville is we have a very high number of students found eligible and brought up for eligibility for gifted. And I think that's a place that we want to be. And it just takes a change in perspective of how you see these students. It's not they're not academic challenged, but these are students of promise. We just have to make sure that we're actively seeing that.
And what a great thing to remember. Our students come to us with this great gift of being able to speak another language and be able to use that gift in a way that not only promotes them in the classroom, but allows them to find success in English as well. Just a reminder about our Scaffold to Success series. All of these 6 videos will be available to you throughout the month of April. You could receive 1 Act 48 credit hour for every session that you attend. In addition, make sure that you fill out the exit ticket indicating the correct session that you attended so that you could get the credits for watching and participating. Thank you so much for joining us today. Keep providing those scaffolds to our students and allowing them to get to the next level. You are the key to help our students take things that they already know and connect it to the unknown. So thank you for providing those scaffolds and supports. All of the resources are linked in this slide deck and are available for you to use. I hope you check out the resources provided today. Thanks again for supporting our students. If there's anything I can do for you, please feel free to reach out to me at adamc@cliu.org. Thank you.